Well, if not, I'd like to go on to perhaps the most important segment of this meeting. Important because it's really fun. Well, believe it or not, 3 individuals in the company have finally completed 20 years of services with Finnigan Corporation. Of course, we have a large number of them in Bremen, but these 3 were the first 3 that made it in San Jose. And I know you all know who these 3 are, so I'm not going to give you a great deal of introduction. As a matter of fact, I took a great risk and I asked them if we would share with us their experience about early days of the company. And I don't know what to expect when we hear the story. But in the meantime, let me hand out this service award, first of all, to Bob Finnigan, who started the company January. Congratulations, Bob. Undoubtedly, not only the most popular individual in the company, but undoubtedly the most popular individual in the whole mass spec global community. I think I can say that without a fear of contradiction. The second person on the list who started the same day as Bob did, those crazy guys, that would be Mike Story. Yeah. Congratulations, Mike. Oh, well. I'm sorry I've left out the pings for Bob. Those second diamonds are tough to earn. And third individual who was a little slow, but always finishes fast. He started with the company 10 days later. That would be Bill Feast. Congratulations, Bill. Because Bills tend to be so quiet in the R&D office, but let me tell you something about Bill many of you perhaps not aware of. For years and years, and continue to be, Bill is undoubtedly the individual who understands more about the fundamental of quadrupole than anyone else in the company. He also is the one who has been responsible in designing the electronics, what we fondly call the radio for the mass spectrometer. Still, by the way, 20 years later, still the same principle of design that Bill had done is the key to the tremendous long-term stability performance of our instrument. Also, is the same design that enable our instrument to do better than any other instrument in terms of pinpointing specific masses and be able to hold the stability. And we are very, very glad in the meantime Bill have been able to help cultivate the next generation of electronic engineers, because we were really worried that what happened if something happened to Bill. I think we all would not know how to design the radios anymore. Well, you're all very eager to see I have extra pin over here, and why is it here? Well, I tell you, we are breaking a company tradition and precedent, setting a new precedent. There's an individual who for more than 20 years has really been the soul of the company, even though he is not an employee of the company. I have the privilege of knowing him more than 30 years, and I even would tell you, I don't have time this morning, but when interested, I can tell you he actually is the person who guided my whole career. And I was just lucky enough to stumble into him the first time I ever made a sales call in my life. And but ever since then, he has been really encouraging the company, and we often refer to him as the conscience of the company, because whenever we go very far astray, he would refocus our attention to why we are in the industry to do. So without further ado, I would like to present this 20-year service award, because he's indeed been helping the company for more than 20 years, to Dr. John Amy. Congratulations. Congratulations. Want to say a few words? Say a few words.
What TZ forgot about was the fact that he has provided us with a lovely way to spend January and February away from the snow. And so we appreciate the hospitality you all give us when we come out here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. And I just want to reemphasize my comments about John is not simply pleasantry, but I think those of you who know the technology well and know the instrumentation industry well, you know what a role John has played. In recognition of John's lifetime achievement, American Chemical Society gave him an award a couple of years ago for his achievement in this area. Okay, now we'd like to go to the really fun part of the meeting by turning the meeting over to Bob, Mike, and Bill, who promised to give us quite a show. I just want to have one last announcement to make. While you were all sitting here, back there, our caterer has sneaked in 3 very nice-looking cakes there. And you have to hold on, however. I know you just had a big breakfast, and it's we don't want you to fall asleep. So that just would like to let you know, at 12 o'clock there will be cake cutting ceremony, and the biggest cutter up of all time, Mike Story, will be in charge. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, TZ. Bill, why don't you join us? I could tell TZ was a little worried about my getting here today. He stopped by my house at 7:20 to pick me up this morning. As you've already gathered from TZ's remarks, Bill Feast in our startup crew is the brains of the group in bringing the quadrupole from a laboratory oddity into a scientific instrument. Mike was the muscle in doing that, and I was the mouth. And
things just don't change.
I can't fool you, so I might as well tell you. Anyway, what we thought we would do today is show you a few slides taken over the years. Mike actually had the largest collection of slides, but his were lost somewhere while he was in Bremen, I think. So most of the ones we're showing are slides that I took in the early days, and several of them belong to Mike and several of them to Bill. We thought this might be one way of showing you the buildings that we started up in, showing you some of the early products, and maybe we'll play it by ear from there. So if I can have the first slide. Is there a you want to turn on the slide projector, Fred? Do we have a, we don't. The first slide I'm showing is a slide of Ken Shoulders. And Ken was really the person, he was not the inventor of the quadrupole mass spectrometer, but Ken was rather the person who felt that this could be a useful instrument. Ken was working at Stanford Research Institute in the late 50s. And in fact, Bill Feast started working for him there in 1959 and actually started work on the quadrupole there in 1959. Ken moved on to other things, but he worked with us as a consultant in the early days, and this was a picture taken of him actually in 1967 in our office on Hanover Street in Palo Alto. No.
Do they know something we don't?
First, oh, it is. Bill, I'm going to ask you to explain the next several slides, if you don't mind, of the early quad.
Well, that actually is an early version of the quadrupole system that those of you that may be familiar with the 1015 may see some similarities there. The actual fact is that that's actually kind of a latecomer in the business, because the piece of junk you see or will see on the table over there is literally the first RF generator that I ever built for one of the quadrupoles, you might say, in this branch of the quadrupole industry. People had built lots of quadrupoles before, but and this was a laboratory curiosity also. And it so happens that for some reason I have not the original quadrupole, but the original 4 rods that I made to run with that pile of junk, which predated this thing even. So why do I have those? I don't know. They're in my toolbox back there. To those of you that are technically inclined, you'll also find that my original electron multiplier is over there. It doesn't look anything like the electron multipliers we use now. In fact, it's a photomultiplier tube. We broke the glass off of it one day in a hurry and mounted it on some resistors because we weren't getting anywhere the way we were doing it before. So I'm trying to see if I recognize that. You better let Mike tell you about that one.
Well, there was a company before Finnigan that we worked at, and this was one of the original RF generators. Same basic design, but one of the interesting things about that big black knob there was a mass range switch. Well, this was an instrument designed by electronics people, so you didn't know what mass you went to, but you sure knew which frequency you went to. That was labeled 1 megahertz, 1.5 megahertz, and 2 megahertz rather than mass 50 and mass 100 and 300.
This was actually the first one that we built together, and we delivered it to SRI. At that point, we were building them for them. Next slide. Recognize this, Bill? I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, I don't recognize the guy, though.
Next slide. This, Bill, you got me? Bill did the design. Bill did the design of the electronics under Ken Scholar's at SRI, and most of the electronics, really in the first 8 or 10 years of quadrupole designs, were really following what Bill had done in the earliest days. You want to comment, Bill?
Let me make one more comment. The original units we built, in fact, the transistor was invented and became commercial sort of during the time we were doing this. So these original units were not only all tubes in the RF generator, but they were all tubes in everything, the operational amplifiers and the whole works. Again, to those of you who are technically inclined, I don't know if any of you ever tried to build an ion source control using all tubes to control low voltages, but it's a mess.
Next slide. This. Yeah, lots of batteries. Next slide. This was actually our first home on 2625 Hanover Street in Palo Alto, and we actually started up in the back end of this building. It had previously been used as a warehouse garage, and there were the 3 of us and 2 or 3 other people who moved into this operation in 1967. And in fact, I think we moved in February 7th of 1967. Next slide. I think you saw this one in this month's issue of the Echo, and it shows our first sort of engineering department with George Davis, who worked for Bill, on the left, Diane, whose last name I've forgotten, who worked in manufacturing in the center, and that's really Vic Borgness on the right. Next slide. This was our manufacturing department, and that's Wally Schaefer over in the corner against the wall, and I don't remember the name of the other fellow. Do you remember? Bill Kinnaman? They were working on the first product, which is in the next slide. You want to talk about this one?
Well, when we first started, we had to kind of divvy up the chores, and one of the things we needed was money, and so we built a residual gas analyzer that we could sell right away through actually Granville Phillips, and this is the first model of the residual gas analyzer, and we designed and built it, and by June of that first year started deliveries, and one of the fellows that started with us, Dick Hine, took charge of that whole project, both the manufacturing as well as helping out with the design. And then Bill and I went on and did the first mass spectrometer. So that's the first residual gas analyzer. And I think there was a lot of negotiation Bob went through over the angle of that top panel. I don't know whether he wants to tell you about that. But
And in fact, at one time, I went to England shortly after we built this, and we had an artist's model of this, and I had a picture of the artist's model, and I was attempting to get the president of VG Instruments, Bernard Eastwell, to rep us in England, and he still laughs about it, that he was asked to do all this on the basis of a picture of a it was a cardboard model of an instrument that hadn't been built. Believe it or not, he thought he wanted to go ahead. The next slide shows it wasn't really the second product, but this was the product I had the hardest time getting into engineering and manufacturing because Mike and Dick didn't want to build it. And what it is a residual gas analyzer that sold for a lot less than the previous model, and it went out to about mass 400 or 500. And I don't think we actually sold too many of them, so you might have been right after all. We actually gave up the business of selling these RGAs. We really did it through Granville Phillips, and they sort of ran out of gas after a while, and we didn't pursue that any further, but instead went on to the next product. The next slide. This shows, Bill, what is that?
That thing is a 1015, and that might very well be serial number 2 because our first customer didn't want number 1. And as I recall, a word I got was he absolutely didn't want number 1, so we put a 2 on the back. Incidentally, there were several of us around who lived on coffee and Coke in those days. Do you see the Coke bottle handy there?
Next slide. You want to talk about this one?
just a comment about one of the previous slides, Bob going out and selling things that we didn't have, and then coming back and convincing us that he could sell 5 in the U.S. alone, let alone the rest of the world. Well, I think that was always a little bit of a bone of contention, but also a real challenge. And I know Bill and I both felt that if we could make 60% of what Bob said we could do come true, that we'd done our job. And then after we delivered the instrument, Bob had a little more of his job to do. But we felt pretty successful at doing those. This was the first mass spectrometer, and it was completed at the end of the first year. We delivered it to Stanford Medical School in January, actually, of the second year. And Bill and I kind of split the chores on this. The cabinet on the left is his, and the cabinet on the right was mine. I don't understand the cabinet on the left. It's full of electrons and things. The one on the right, if you believe me anyway, is really a vacuum system, an analyzer, a gas chromatograph, a batch inlet, and anything else Bob said it was.
I have some pictures. Next slide. Next slide.
There's the batch inlet. That had the most distinction as causing the most amount of panic, because those of you that have worked with vacuum systems and glass know what a terrible sound a clink is, and that used to clink all the time.
Next slide.
Well, you almost can't see it, but if you look at the bottom of that picture, the batch inlet is on the left, the gas chromatograph. I mean, you may have seen some of these diagrams of a swing, the way the designer had it, the way the guy sold it, you know. Well, that thing on the right, on the bottom, is a gas chromatograph. And when that got delivered, Bob had a lot of explaining to do. Next slide.
Next.
Whoops. Our first solid probe was really hard to put in. This was our applications lab. There were two things that were distinctive about the start of the company. One was we had rosewood, fake rosewood top desks, and the other is the front panels on those was a brown felt finish, and that was my burden to bear for many years. It looked great. It really looked nice until you used it.
Next slide. This was the first Mike Story GCMS interface you're looking at. And that's a variable leak valve. And that didn't exactly fly. So he improved it, and in the next slide you'll see what the improvement looked like. He just wound some tape around it. And
the thing in the middle of the flange there is our first ion source heater too. It's a little hole with a heater in it.
the next slide shows the ultimate solution, which actually was quite a breakthrough in the business, and that's a single-stage glass jet separator. Another thing to clink. And a lot of our effort went into making this work. The next slide is a photograph Mike has taken, which you may want to explain.
Yeah, these are the two glass jets, and the one on the right is about a 1,500 PSI-D, and the one on the left I think was about 4 times that. We had a lot of trouble with those in terms of reproducibility, and so this was actually part of an attempt to understand the shape and so on. But I think it kind of turned out to be a pretty picture. It's full of liquid. It's not in operation.
Next slide. This was our second home, which was right behind the first one. It was a little larger building. It was more expensive, I believe, more expensive than we could afford. But we were able to afford a sign, which is shown in the next slide, which was the first time we identified ourselves. Otherwise, they couldn't find us. And that's Mike on the left and Frank Davis. I don't know if Frank's here today or not. Ernie Benelli and Sally Penna. And next slide shows our first production line. We actually had about 4 orders for 1015s, and you're looking at the 4 getting ready to be produced. It was getting close to the end of the quarter. The next slide. This shows the same production line in a little different view. We added, in 1969, we added the System Industries 150 to the Model 1015 GCMS. And that is the first data system that was offered commercially, and it's the system you see to the left of the electronic console. It was the first unit was delivered to Evan Horning at Baylor Medical College sometime around September of '69. Next slide. You want to talk about this one, Bill? It's the upright, the SL.
Yeah, I don't know whether I remember. It's been a long time. I got a couple other comments I'll throw in at this point. One thing was that it was fun for me because I was the only actual practicing electronicer. I think Bob's an electronicer, but he was out selling these things all the time. And I remember that the chemists used to have lots of, shall we say, arguments about how to do things. And I think the third or fourth time I required the relayout of that RF unit board in the 1015 because I was just sure something was going to go wrong. The lead designer we had didn't understand high voltage, and he had these RF traces running too close together on it. And I think these guys were wondering what they'd got in the way of an electronicer about that point. But they didn't say anything. They were very nice about the whole thing. And also, we had an interesting way of celebrating in those days. When something actually would work, every once in a while, why somebody would go down to the grocery store, and that was the days of the Falstaff pony keg, the little tiny beer keg, and buy a bag of potato chips and a pony keg. And
Hawk the company.
I think the first day that we ever actually had a customer in to look at an instrument, we did that. We got a spectrum off. It looked like it was going to work, and somebody said, well, shall we called the fellows at Stanford, and somebody else said, yeah, I guess we better do it. It's running. And so somebody else went down to the store and got the pony keg and the potato chips, and that was where I actually met Walt Reynolds, who I don't know whether he's here this morning or not, but he's the guy that really laid the foundations for that early data system.
This model is called the SL, and Bob went on one of his trips, and the day he got back, he said every time he got back, he had a whole list of things for us to do. Matter of fact, a very long list, and this was one of them. And this was SL for Sandy Lipsky, because if we rearranged the whole cabinet and redid it, Sandy Lipsky would buy one. Well, so we did. And when HP brought out a sit-down mass spectrometer, we made a sit-down mass spectrometer, and then we made a stand-up mass spectrometer. Well, finally, while this was fairly good-natured, but there was a bit of tension about this, and so finally we decided that we had to calm things down a bit. And Bob agreed. He agreed that we couldn't be making all these changes all the time. And so Bob brought in TZ Chew. And now, if you can imagine the sensibility of bringing TZ in to calm things down, you have some idea of just what bad shape we were in.
Well, one of the first things TZ did was to move us out of the expensive lodgings we were in. And I don't know if that's the next slide or not, but we'll try. Now this, before we left Palo Alto, Hanover Street forever, we built, this was the first true GC peak identifier. And as a matter of fact, we built this, designed it, engineered, and built it before TZ arrived. And my magic number for this instrument was $19,995. And that was what it really took to get your foot in the door at that time. It turned out it cost more than $19,000. So actually the first thing TZ did when he arrived was to double the price of this instrument. But actually it was an instrument, I think it was the instrument that really made GCMS a sort of household word, if you pardon the expression. And we really took it in a trailer, took it all around the United States. We ran it live. John Cornelius and I lived through fires in Houston and God knows what else. I think Vic Borgness was there as well. And we really put a lot of miles on this mass spectrometer. We would go out 3 weeks at a time, and you could hardly remember your name when you got home. Anyway, it really did a job in making GCMS, let's say, something that people really believe would work. The next slide. This does show where TZ moved us to. And that, a lot of you know, is our first home in Sunnyvale. It had a lot of room in there. We actually only took over half of the building. But the next couple slides, the next slide shows this shows we took our sign along with us, I guess. Next slide shows some of the room we had in the back. And the next slide. And one more. We had all kinds of room, as you can see. But we're building products in this same building. And the next slide shows one of the first products that came out there. And you might want to describe it, Mike.
Well, one time Bob came back from the trip and he said he'd met this neat guy, and he was doing chemical ionization. Well, the neat guy was Marvin Vestal and Bill Johnston, two guys, two crazy cigar-smoking guys. So we joined up together to build a chemical ionization mass spectrometer, and this actually is the second generation. The first generation, which we actually bought from them, really didn't work. And Marvin and I spent lots of days down in Baylor in Texas, who Evan Horning bought, I think, the very first one. And we couldn't make it work there. We couldn't make it work in Baltimore. So finally we got a contract from NIH through Hank Fales to design from scratch a new CI system, and that was this one. It was actually an add-on to the 1015. And I guess we were in the SL version at those days. So that was a stand-up mass spectrometer. I just, when Bob mentioned 1995, I thought of another little anecdote. Bob sold the whole idea of the company on a $20,000 mass spectrometer, and he spent the next 10 years trying to make one. Never mind that the $20,000 mass spectrometer didn't have any way of getting a sample in or any way of getting a signal out, and it had an outstanding GC.
Next slide. This is, as you know, is John Amy with Mike Story in the early days, and actually, I mentioned about the brains, muscle, and mouth. Actually, John was sort of our confessor, and he used to, TZ mentioned him as our conscience, which he also was, but actually John reviewed the first plan that I wrote and presented to TZ and Roger Sant back in '67. And I never did find out whether he recommended go ahead or not. But from then on, John was committed, and whenever we really had a tough problem, John would come out and help to solve it. We did him a big favor and shipped him the second instrument we ever built. And I think he had a little trouble getting that running.
Well, spent a lot of time at Purdue.
But anyway, John really has been a big help to us in the company, and I'm really happy to see him get an award that is really justified. The next slide, I think, might be the last one. And this shows TZ trying to explain the drop in quarterly earnings to the and the people taking a picture were the Mercury News. And I was saying, oh, God, you know. Anyway, that's the last of the slides that I have here. I might just wind up with a comment that the 20th anniversary of the company is certainly a big occasion for me, as it is for many of you, and in many ways I find it analogous to approaching my 60th birthday, which I really am doing. and there are just several things that are pretty important. And first is that you're alive and reasonably healthy, and I think we both are. And that's the biggest thing that counts. I think, like all parents, you're really happy to see your offspring doing so well. And in this case, people here, in a figurative sense, our offspring. We also have a lot of instruments out there, 5,000 or 6,000 around the world, which I think are also doing pretty well. I think maybe the last part of it is that you sort of hope that maybe the next 20 years will be easier, and that you have a few chances to rest here and there. So far, there's no prospect of that, either for the company or for me. But it has really been fun for me. Thank you.
Well, I certainly feel the same as Bob, and I think there are a couple of things that are important to people. One is their job, and the other is their family. And I'm really happy to say that I've got the same job and the same family as I had 20 years ago. And not a whole lot of people can say that, but it is a nice feeling, and it does make me feel good. And I wish that you have the same kinds of happiness and success.
I guess that sort of reflects my feelings also. It turns out I also have the same job, same family. The family's grown a little bit. I've got 9 grandchildren running around now, and I don't know how many grandchildren we have amongst the other two. Bob may have a batch by now, but so it's been fun.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Well, I hope you have enjoyed this little historical presentation as much as I have, and certainly brought back a lot of fond memory. And I must say, it's very clear all our memory is rather selective, because I really can't remember any of the bare moments. I recognize a number of pictures that some of them Bob hasn't pointed out, but one cannot help but see one's role in this thing here. And the one thing I absolutely noticed was that the picture Bob showed. It was in black and white, and it was very clear my hair was black. And, well, that's some other changes that's happened. And I think that the Mike was very, very rightfully acknowledged the contribution, the family to a success thing. I see Lou down there. Lou Story. Lou, why don't you stand up and receive our congratulations as well. And Ruthanna Amy. Ruthanna. I know Ruthanna always wonder about why it's necessary for John to keep taking trip to California or wherever it is that we need help in, and that I hope Ruthanna feel the same visceral participation in Finnigan as we feel about her. You didn't bring your wife, did you, Bob? I didn't either. So. But I did know was somewhat of a statistical remark that it is interesting that I just realized all the Finnigan people who stood up here, and myself included, and John, that still have the same wife, so the job can't be that tough. Well, maybe I open this to the floor and ask if anybody has any question they would like to ask, in historical context or anything else. Well, if not, thank you again for joining us to help us celebrate this 20th anniversary. Remind you again that there will be coffee and cake at lunchtime and noon, and please join us to celebrate as well. Thank you again. Yeah.